we began with some, I don't know if they're semi-diverging views perhaps, on how the integration process can continue. And I suppose the question that I have for each of you is, as we move, or perhaps we don't move, towards deeper or further political integration over time within the EU, we certainly are moving closer towards economic integration. How do we manage the challenge of democratic legitimacy? David, you touched on it briefly there in your comments in relation to, the possibility of pan-European elections and sort of allegiance to a supranational entity and all of that. But I'm interested to hear how we, I suppose, as politicians in the member states, can try to, reconnect with citizens and make the structures of the European Union more accountable, more democratic for the citizens. Thank you.
I believe one thing what's lacking is the narrative. What is Europe for? It was crystal clear in the 50s that Europe was there to avoid the Third World War. Afterwards, Europe was there to defend our values, our democracy, our freedom, our economies, and there was a rival there behind the Iron Curtain. I'm not sure that those values, which are still important, but are able to mobilize our people. I mean, if you tell young French or young German of 20 years old that Europe is meant to avoid a war between Germany and France, I do believe that the only war they may think about is the war in the Europe World Cup, or the Olympic Games. I mean, they not think, and this is something extraordinarily positive, but they don't think French and Germans as the eternal enemies. This is great. But this does not mobilize. I mean, you don't take people to the polls or to the elections saying, no, we are making Europe to avoid a war. So I think what is lacking in Europe is a narrative. We have to build up on this. The Europeans, who counted for 28% of the economy of the world in the 50s, will only be account for 7% in the year 2050, according to studies. So even what Lucinda calls the big countries in Europe, even the big, they are small. They cannot compete. So we have to be united. We have to put our strength together. We can be either a little promontory on the continent of Asia, and we would be a very nice museum where Koreans or Indonesians will come and visit us and say, that's Europe, fantastic, Dublin, Joyce, Finnegan's Wake, Guinness. Well, it can be that, or we can deliver as always and be a strong Europe to defend our people, our values. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not written anywhere else. It's just up to us. If we want to take a part in the world, to play a role with our values, or just to be part of a nice and happy museum.
Íñigo this morning was saying that the new European Commission President should be a candidate in the European elections. That is also an idea. There is the idea of electing the European Commission President. This idea has been doing its way for a long time, and it is progressing. So all these kind of ideas are possible ideas. I agree with the need to increase democratic legitimacy. All solutions are possible, but accountability is something we should provide to our citizens. I think it is one of the answers to the present confusion times that Íñigo was just mentioning. One of the ways to avoid being an history museum is to put our citizens connected with the political union, and for this, accountability and democratic legitimacy are paramount.
I think greater transparency is part of the answer. That is not always easy because you're dealing with, at council level, with negotiations amongst 27 countries. There is usually a bargain behind the scenes about the text of any particular measure, and there's sometimes a linkage to something else. But I think there is often a temptation amongst national politicians to come and explain something. So Europe is saying we have to do this. And actually, we sometimes need to make the case rather more boldly that we think this is, on balance, the best deal for our country in these circumstances. Having the information out in the open and subject to sort of peer review is no bad thing. And we created after the election the Office of Budgetary Responsibility to make our own government more accountable. So I think having independent agencies sort of making information available, it's going to happen anyway because of the internet. So let's make a virtue of necessity and be more open with information. But I think also two other things are important. First of all, I think that the European institutions need to define and limit their ambitions. If you start to list, I had a debate last week, earlier this week, in the Commons on the Commission work programme for 2012. Now that included 129 different initiatives, which didn't count some of the ones inherited from previous years that are still live in 2012. And you actually start saying to people, right, you need to follow what is happening in the European Union. They give up. And I think that more of a reality could be made of subsidiarity, which is written into the treaties as a principle. I don't really see why detailed rules about the number of hours that people work should have to be set at European level. I don't see that the common fisheries policy has been a success at European level. I think it would be much better managed at regional and local level, involving local fishing communities. And I think, above all, come back to the point I started on at the beginning, I think Europe has to focus upon the things that actually matter to the lives of ordinary citizens. Because at the moment, I say this, to go back, there's too much about process, with conversations conducted in a jargon that is completely impenetrable to 99 point something of the people we represent. And Europe has to show that our joint efforts are intended to and are successful in creating jobs, increasing prosperity, and enhancing security for ordinary families across the continent. And if we manage to persuade people that we are serious and successful in doing that, that is the starting point for winning back public confidence.